With threats to our nation waiting around every corner, adaptability is more important than ever. When conditions change without notice, quick strategic thinking is crucial. And with obstacles consistently impending, determination is essential in overcoming them. It's this willingness, decisiveness, and resilience that sets Marines apart. With our fighting spirit, we don't just fight battles, we win them. Marines are the constant our nation counts on to fight the unknown. And through adaptable problem solving, we do just that. Learn more at marines.com.
At Bet365, we don't do ordinary. We believe that every sport should be epic. Every home run, every hit, every inning, every play. From the moments that are legendary to the ones that fly under the radar. Whether it's a walk-off grand slam or a base hit to center field. Whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. 21 plus only. Must be physically located in Virginia. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. At Bet365, we don't do ordinary. We believe that every sport should be epic. Every home run, every hit, every inning, every play. From the moments that are legendary to the ones that fly under the radar. Whether it's a walk-off grand slam or a base hit to center field. Whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. 21 plus only. Must be physically located in Virginia. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER.
Hello and welcome to 1865, the Nottingham Forest Podcast. It is Friday the 12th of April 2024 and this is our Friday 5 weekly news roundup with me, Rich Ferraro. In a few minutes we'll discuss the latest City Ground news offerings with our special guest, Ellie Molloson. But firstly, let's go straight over to the 1865 news desk. We're going to be joined by George Edwards.
Hello and welcome to your Friday 5 news roundup with me, George Edwards. The headline of this week's news is that Nottingham Forest's relegation rivals Everton have received the second point deduction of the season, a deduction of 2 points, meaning they have now seen 8 points taken from them this season for 2 breaches of the Premier League's profitability and sustainability rules. The Toffees breached the £105 million allowance in losses by £16.6 million in the latest 3 financial periods, with the Commission concluding that Everton should be deducted 3 points as standard, plus a further 2 for the significance of the breach. However, much like Forest's PSR case, the Commission accepted various mitigating factors, including their early guilt admission, the loss of revenue due to their ties with a Russian sponsor, and the fact that they have already seen points docked this season, leading to 3 points being handed back and the eventual 2-point deduction. Sean Dyche's side now sit in 16th place, 2 points above Forest and the relegation zone, but with a game in hand with crucial relegation scraps against both Forest and Luton, along with Brentford, to come. Secondly, and during Forest's 3-1 defeat at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, it was announced that former manager Joe Kinnear had passed away at the age of 77. An impressive defender in his day, Kinnear was scouted by Tottenham at the age of 17 and signed in 1965, going on to play for the Lily Whites for 10 years, including triumphs in the FA Cup, League Cup, and whilst also making 26 appearances for Ireland. After finishing his career with Brighton, Kinnear managed in Asia before taking over from Peter Witt as AFC Wimbledon manager in '92, leading the Dons to a 6th place Premier League finish in 1994, 9th the next season, as Kinnear was at the helm until 1999. He went on to manage and promote Luton before being appointed as Paul Hart's successor as Nottingham Forest manager in 2004. Relegation threatened Forest rose up the table and finished 14th, with the expectation of a promotion push next campaign. That didn't transpire, as Forest, albeit with most games being pretty tight, failed to pick up a win in their first 9 games, with a 3-0 loss at Pride Park sealing Kinnear's fate, and Forest appointed Gary Megson next. You know the rest. Kinnear went on to manage and later become director at Newcastle, and it was announced in 2021 that Kinnear had been living with dementia since 2015. Joe Kinnear died on the 7th of April 2024, and everybody at 1865 sends their thoughts to Kinnear's family and friends at this difficult moment. The third headline of this week's news is that semi-automated offsides will be used in the Premier League next season. Yesterday, it was announced that following a meeting between Premier League shareholders, the clubs took a unanimous decision to agree on the implementation of semi-automated offsides, with the technology set to be brought in after the first or second international break of next season. The system was used at the FIFA 2022 World Cup in Qatar and is currently in place in the UEFA Champions League. The technology is set to cut VAR delays by around 30 seconds. It's a stark change in attitude from the beginning of the season, when clubs voted against bringing it in June 2023. Let's hope that Forest will be present to see that change. Now on to the fourth story, which is that Neco Williams has been voted Forest Player of the Month for March for the second month in a row. After winning the award in February, Williams' sterling form continued into March, one of only 3 players to play every minute for Forest last month. Williams also featured in both Wales' fixtures in March, scoring a stunning free kick against Finland and converted from the spot as the Dragons missed out on qualification for this summer's Euros on penalties against Poland. In total, Williams has now made 24 appearances for Forest this campaign and is now one of the first names on Nuno Espirito Santo's team sheet, having started the season well down the pecking order. It's an inspirational turnaround and his performances are just a joy to watch at the moment. And finally, Forest B team progressed into the semi-finals of the Premier League Cup. A 3-2 win over Sheffield United at Bramall Lane saw Nottingham Forest advance into the semi-finals of the Under-21 Premier League Cup, with a tie against Tottenham Hotspur seemingly to come. Forest took the lead after just 12 minutes as Joe Gardner capitalised on a mix-up between the Blaze defender and goalie, slotting home from 2 yards out. After hitting the woodwork and forcing Forest keeper Aaron Bott into a fine stop, United got level before the break through Willa Sula. Forest then retook the lead in the second half as substitute Atif Konate bagged before he scored a second to make it 3-1. The hosts converted a penalty through Asula with 20 to play, but Warren Joyce's side held out for victory, a win coming a week after an Athletic piece reported that Forest had fielded a homegrown player in every matchday squad for over 4,000 consecutive games. This result will hopefully pave the way for that statistic to continue for many years. That's it for your news roundup. Let's hope for a positive display this weekend as Forest host Wolves. Come on, you Reds, and back to you, Rich.
Why, thank you, George, and thank you very much for providing us with the news this week. Jamie will be back next week after a well-deserved holiday. Ellie, it's been a while since we've had a chat. How have you been, and how do you feel about Forest's progress since we last spoke?
I've had COVID, so I feel much better now. And I think Forest have made a lot of progress since we last spoke. I can't remember the last time we spoke, but I don't think we were in a very good position when we did. Things are looking very tight at the moment in terms of the league, as we all know, in the table. So really, we're not comfortable in any way. But in terms of the games we've got left this season, our performances have looked very promising. So actually, despite it looking very stressful, I'm not really that stressed about being relegated. I don't think we will get relegated. In short, I think we'll be all right.
Okay, well, you're always optimistic, aren't you, Ellie? And one of the things that you say you're not stressed, but one of the things that has caused stress for most of the Forest fan base was to do with that first story that George brought us, which is the PSR deduction, points deduction for Everton. And in the end, it was just 2 points for a £16.6 million breach. The sentence was commuted slightly on the basis that they've already had a breach for this same reporting period. So how do you feel about that, Ellie? Do you think that's fair? Do you think that that is reasonable considering the punishment that they've already had and the punishment that Forest have had this season?
I think as a Forest fan, obviously I was hoping for the worst for them, with all due respect, Everton, I was hoping, 10 points ideally, but in terms of if I'm being non-biased, it is fair. Well, as fair as it can be until Man City actually face any sort of sanction. I think 2 points was fair. I don't think they should have had any more. They've already been sanctioned. The Premier League has its favourites, as we do know, and it would be just extremely harsh to dock them even more. Well, they already have more points deducted, but 2 points isn't going to cause them too many problems.
Okay, well, that is something that I think Everton fans might or might not agree with you on. I maintain the same position that I've maintained all season, which is points deduction or not. If Dominic Calvert-Lewin's scoring goals, they'll be okay. And bearing in mind he scored an extremely jammy one the other day, maybe that gives us all the information we need. But of course, Luton and Everton have to play each other in what will be the very definition of a six-pointer. Just very briefly on this one, Ellie, the Luton chief executive has been saying that he thinks that actually Everton were very lucky to only get 2 points because with two deductions in this, two breaches in the same time period, you'd expect the second deduction to be bigger than the first. To me, I have some sympathy with that perspective, but it also shows what an absolute mess the Premier League have made of implementing these rules. What do you think?
I can see the argument for saying they've breached again, but if it's in the same time period, that time period's already happened. If it was, so to my understanding, it's say the same time period as the first breach. If it's, say, next season they have a breach again, then it's kind of a different story. Kind of, you've been warned a few times now. You're almost just accepting taking the loss and being audacious with it. But like you say, I think it would be really harsh. And I'm with I think, was it Paul Faulkner who said there should be like an almost amnesty? How are we docking points off of teams where it could genuinely directly lead to relegation, which is very much the case for us, for example, when Manchester City are able to continue to win titles whilst they've got 115 allegations over their head. So at the end of the day, I don't think anyone should be docked any points until Manchester City are. But that's asking too much from the Premier League. Corruption at its finest. They must protect their favourite big six, because that is unfortunately how it goes.
Well, don't sit on the fence there, will you, Ellie? What I will say is that just a reminder that, so as we've said on this podcast before, it's almost like the rules were there and the clubs have broken them, but the actual sanctions are being made up as they go along, and that doesn't feel right. But on the other hand, the clubs have voted for it. So, turkeys voting for Christmas is a phrase we've used before and a phrase that's come up again. Let's move on to the next story, which is the sad news about Joe Kinnear passing away. Obviously, George did provide a summary of much of Joe's career and including his time at Forest. But George and Ellie, you're both too young to really have been around when Joe Kinnear was in charge at the City Ground. So I thought I'd ask one of the older members of our podcasting team, Baz, to provide his thoughts upon this news.
I don't think there are any Forest fans who'd ever say that Joe Kinnear was their favourite manager, but I don't think any of us would ever want someone to suffer for years with dementia, so my thoughts go out to him and his family and friends. His death is in a way quite timely, given the battle for 18th spot in the Premier League table seems to be between us and Luton Town. While his greatest success came at Wimbledon, as we were sinking, he took them to the top half of the Premier League for successive seasons. He came to us as a manager after taking Luton Town up from the second division. As for us, we've just been through one of our brightest spells we'd had, with Paul Hart's side reaching the playoffs before capitulating to Sheffield United, a game that still haunts me. For those too young to remember, Paul Hart had been Leeds United's academy director before joining us in the same role. He was promoted to first team manager and got us playing an exciting brand of football, with Marlon Harewood, David Johnson and Nottingham-born Darren Huckabee providing a lightning attack, a number of academy graduates like Andy Reid and later Wes Morgan making it into the team. But the season after the playoffs, the rumour was Leeds wanted him as their manager. Forest refused them permission, so Paul Hart went on a season-long march. As a result, we sank down the table, Hart was sacked and Joe Kinnear came in. I distinctly remember being very, very impressed at Kinnear's first press conference. He said all the right things, taking in the history of the club, acknowledging the fans and the talent at the academy, but also pointing out where the changes needed to be made. And he did that immediately. He signed a left winger in Andy Impey, and he gave us some bite in midfield with Paul Evans. Neither the type of player to get hearts racing, but Kinnear identified the two biggest weak spots in the squad and he filled them immediately. Both players went on to enjoy minor cult status. Andy Impey's got no neck and Evo toughened up our soft belly. Next season, 2004-2005, started optimistically as we thought maybe we could make a push for promotion. But things went badly wrong, and from our point of view as fans, it seemed like the pressure was getting to Kinnear as he seemed to lose a plot. He was sacked in December, with Forest much where he first found them, right near the bottom of the table. It took another few years before he got another job, joining Newcastle United and making headlines for his swearing in a press conference. And as for us, we got Gary Megson as our next manager. If we thought things were bad before, they got even worse as Megson led us into League One. So thanks, Joe. You came to us at a difficult time, you identified the problems and put them right, and for a very brief time you put a smile on our faces and onto Andy Impey's neck.
Okay, thank you very much, Baz. With his reflections upon Joe Kinnear's later stage of his career, including his time in charge at Nottingham Forest. And as just to echo what George and Baz have both said, dementia is no way to live any part of your life. And so our thoughts go out to Joe Kinnear's nearest and dearest. Let's move back to issues on the pitch and something that is about to happen. Let's talk about the introduction of semi-automated offside, something which was previously vetoed by Premier League clubs, but it looks as though it'll come in after the autumn international break. Ellie, how do you feel about this?
I'm intrigued as to why it wasn't allowed before. Not allowed, why it wasn't agreed before even. I can't see an issue with it. Per se, I might be missing something, but I can see it to be only a good thing. That's kind of all there is on it. I can only see it being good.
So I'm just going to play devil's advocate here. And so firstly, I don't know what the cost implications are, but I mean, given the budgets that Premier League clubs have, it's going to be a drop in the ocean. Secondly, the other thing I can think about is that there have been loads and loads of implementations of rules and ways of doing things that have seemed to be really good when they've been put into practice in World Cups, in Euros, and in other leagues. And then when it's in the Premier League, they make an absolute horlicks of it. So can the Premier League and the clubs manage to get semi-automated offsides as wrong as VAR, as wrong as additional officials, as wrong as all the other bits and pieces that they've managed to make a mess of?
Yeah, I think is the short answer to that. So in my head, I think we were all excited for VAR, thinking brilliant, no more ridiculous decisions, and what I'd give to have a championship ref and a championship game. Gosh, what a joke it has been. So I think there will. Yeah, I think you're right. There certainly will be a way to find an issue, and there will be a way to benefit the Big Six, and any clubs further down the table, decisions won't go their way, knowing how it's been in previous years and as it is now.
Okay. I mean, I would just point out that I think Rotherham United fans will disagree with you on this one, Ellie. On Wednesday night, they had the most ridiculous penalty given against them. If any of you listeners haven't seen it, then do look it up on YouTube or your social media platform of choice, because they essentially had a penalty given against them for the ball hitting their defender's face a yard outside the area, and that was given as a handball inside the box. So surely even VAR wouldn't have messed that up. But anyway, that's a whole other thing. While Ellie stews over her conspiracy theories, we're going to take a little break, and we'll be back with the rest of the stories in just a minute.
Hey, it's Kaylee Cuoco for Priceline. Ready to go to your happy place for a happy price? Well, why didn't you say so? Just download the Priceline app right now and save up to 60% on hotels. So whether it's Cousin Kevin's Kazoo Concert in Kansas City, go Kevin, or Becky's Bachelorette Bash in Bermuda, you never have to miss a trip ever again. So download the Priceline app today. Your savings are waiting.
Go to your happy place for a happy price. Go to your happy price, Priceline.
Like all of our podcasts this season, this episode of 1865, the Nottingham Forest Podcast, is sponsored by Greene King Sport, where football is more than a game. Make Greene King your go-to destination for the season's final stretch. But why? Well, for one, you can wash every televised Forest game down with delicious food and refreshing beverages. And with 900 sports pubs dotted around the UK, chances are you're within walking distance of your local Greene King. Let's be honest, watching football is way better with friends and family, so get the squad together for every televised Premier League fixture in an atmosphere worth sharing. That includes huge title showdowns, huge, the race for European qualification, and nail-biting relegation six-pointers, unfortunately involving our very own Nottingham Forest. Don't forget to download the Green King Sport app to enjoy exclusive competitions and discounts whenever there's a game on. Now it's back to your podcast.
You're listening to 1865, the Nottingham Forest Podcast.
Hello and welcome back to 1865, the Nottingham Forest Podcast. It's the Friday 5 News Roundup on Friday the 12th of April with me, Rich Ferraro, and with Ellie Molloson. And Ellie, a nice happy story to resume with, which is that Neco Williams has won Player of the Month for the second consecutive period. And he's really cemented his place in the team, hasn't he?
It's absolutely deserved. I know, to be fair, Chris Wood has been on fire. So there's obviously a case for Chris Wood. But I just think Neco Williams, what I love, and I think my dad also agrees with me on this, is his intensity, as my dad words it. If you remember Neco Williams from last season until the very end, he was, in the politest way possible, quite soft. You could see there was a player there, very skillful. He could make good passes, but, you could practically blow the man over. I don't think he quite was ready for the level of intensity and physicality. And to see such a turnaround in a player where he's picked up on that, he's really intelligent as a player. He works so hard and he's so intense and physical. I don't think I've seen Neco Williams have a bad game in terms of, like we see other players have bad games. He's fairly consistent, which is something that Forest lack, I think, to say the very least. Mm-hmm. And it's so incredibly deserved from the performances he's been giving us. And I can only see good things for him. His work rate is incredible. And he's got to be one of my favourite players right now. I love his mentality. And he's one of the players that I can definitely see cares and loves the club and knows what it means to the fans. And as a fan, that means a lot to me. I will never complain about Neco Williams not going in for a tackle or something like that. If he makes a mistake, he makes a mistake, but it's never through a lack of trying.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the words that, so, your dad would talk about intensity and you mentioned another word that I would talk about, which is consistency. I think it's very easy to forget that Neco was a 21-year-old with very limited first team experience when we signed him. He's obviously first choice left wing back for Wales. He's now first choice right back at Forest. And despite the ups and downs he's had in recent weeks, including obviously Wales losing on that penalty shootout, And let's be honest, Timo Werner gave him a really rough time at White Hart Lane the other day. But listener, I wish you could have seen Ellie's face when I mentioned that. But even then, he's not allowing his head to go down, and that consistency, I think, is something that's puts him ahead of the queue, certainly compared to Gonzalo Montiel, who is simultaneously one of our best and worst players in most matches I've seen him play. Speaking of young players, let's talk about the Forest B team, who have booked their place in the semi-finals of the Premier League Cup with that 3-2 victory over Sheffield United, as George told us. And really, really encouraging to see that the B team, young players, the potentially the future of the club, they're making some progress.
I think absolutely. One thing that Forest is, as George mentioned earlier, really good at is looking after our own and our own talent. And what was it? What was the ridiculous number? Was it like 4,000, did George say?
It's over 4,000 matches consecutively. So I think this is going back to something like 1941 or something, where Forest have had a homegrown player in every single match squad. And the only team who've got a longer record than that is Manchester United. Well, yeah, that's a good noise.
I just think it's so good to see our young players doing so well. It's very promising for our future because we have relied on these young players in the past, as we've seen with Brennan Johnson. And we've got, Ryan Yates now, who's everyone knows, I think, is fantastic. And Joe Worrell and all these young players that we've had. It's just so incredibly important. And Forest is special for that, for really valuing the young players. And knowing that we have a future is certainly reassuring for me, at least. I'm not sure how everyone else feels, but it certainly makes me feel a bit less stressed about the future of Forest.
So at the moment, it's 4,059 games. At the moment in the first team picture, Ryan Yates is the last man standing. So if he were to get injured, then unless we stick Atif Konate or Joe Gardner into the first team squad for that game, then maybe that record will get broken. I'm not sure how high it is on Nuno's agenda, but it's certainly a record to be proud of. And yes, it goes back to October 1941. And also, naturally, I think there has been some criticism, possibly justified in recent times, about the fact that the Forest have bought players, especially since returning to the Premier League. So it maybe has made the route into the first team a bit more difficult, with the idea about Gary Brazil having lost his job. There's that little bit of cynicism from some fans about the future of the youth setup at Forest. But I think, again, we've got a record we can be proud of. And it was good to see that Forest not only scored 3 goals, but when there was pressure on in those last 20 minutes, that they were able to put in a valiant defensive display. I'm quoting there from the match report, to be perfectly honest. So that is something that we should be really proud of, I think. Now, I'm going to move on because as we've covered the 5 stories that George wanted to talk about, but there is also an additional story that's emerged during the day today, as we're recording this on Thursday night. And this is the news about Forest introducing an official season card waiting list. Now, I'm just going to point out that on social media, this has gone down like an absolute cup of cold sick amongst the Forest team, Forest supporters. And perhaps understandably so, because many people will be asked to pay an admin fee of £10 to join a season card waiting list with no guarantee of actually getting a season card. It says here that Forest supporters who join the waiting list will receive priority notifications and have the first opportunity to purchase any new season cards or hospitality facilities that become available through the expansion of stadium facilities. Supporters will also have the best chance of obtaining a season card should one become available following the annual renewal process. So on the one hand, it is grabbing a little bit of extra money, £10 here, £10 there, all adds up. We've got to pay for those PSR breaches. On the other hand, is that another way of fleecing the supporters? And then just to add in a third perspective, well, the club are pitching this as being a way of assessing demand, knowing that they've got to think about a way of expanding the stadium in a financially viable manner. Ellie, as somebody who's been a season card holder for some time, you go home and away, you've put a lot of money into the club, as have your family. How do you feel? Do you feel like you're a valued customer?
No. In short, I'm always one to cut to the chase. I'm not one to beat around the bush nor sugarcoat anything. I love Forest, and I think they're doing some fantastic things, especially with regards to diversity. I think there's a genuine goal there that is focusing on the fans. This is not it. This is not one of those times. I've publicly said I think the ticketing system is a joke. And it's also where they mentioned about assessing the demand. My immediate thoughts of that are we're looking to potentially extend the capacity at City Ground, and it's an extra 5,000 seats plus maybe another 500 in the corners to fill in those gaps with like shipping containers. Or even moving to, was it Toton Lane, I think it was, which I think, sadly, is what's going to happen. And I absolutely think that would be a disgrace. I've said that publicly. I think we're running before we can walk. We're in the Premier League right now. There are glory supporters. Not exactly like there's a lot of glory, if we're honest, but that's the point I want to make. I don't think we're even selling out games at the minute. At the Fulham game, as I said, had COVID. I fell ill. I very rarely miss a game, especially like if it's down to illness, I usually just firm it, but I was bedbound. So I had to look for someone to take my ticket. But, oh, surely someone's going to want this ticket. Let's not let it go to waste. Everyone I knew already had one. And then I put it on Ticket Exchange and couldn't sell it, which says to me, we're not even selling out at the minute. We're only selling out when it's the Man Cities and the Arsenals where we get a bunch of, random fans in a lot of cases, or even Arsenal fans coming and sitting in a home stand to watch Arsenal. And I just think this waiting list is a joke, because how many fans don't renew? If you have a season card now, there's not going to be many fans who won't have a season card next season. And then you're paying £10 for this waiting list and you're not even guaranteed to get onto anything. It's like the ridiculous away membership scheme. There's 5,000 away members, but maximum 3,000 away tickets. And you pay £40 for that away membership. So I just think it's a joke. I think Forest need to reevaluate what is important. And what's important are the supporters who have been here through thick and thin. If we get relegated next season, do they really think we're going to sell out every game? I'll be there. I'll go home and away. I will. But that's because I'm a season card holder and I have been before we got promoted. We're not Man City. We're not Tottenham. Come on. We're better than that. We shouldn't be behaving in such a plastic way. So in conclusion, I think it's ridiculous.
Yeah, and before we started recording, rather cynically, we were saying, well, maybe this is because they're going to put the prices up of season tickets and anticipating that there'll be a few people who won't be renewing, and therefore that's why they have that waiting list to kind of so they can get people to jump in there. I do agree with you in the sense of Forest are good at selling out the ground when things are going well and not so good at doing it when things are not going quite so swimmingly. Obviously, that meant that some fans missed out on the Fulham match, but equally, 2 matches in a week when the weather's not great and Forest aren't doing so well, that's traditionally been the kind of thing that the club have struggled to sell. Just a quick question for you, Ellie. Do you think it's a Forest problem, or do you think it's a Premier League problem in the sense of Premier League clubs have moved to Ticketmaster and these ridiculous ticketing systems, which are supposed to make things better, but actually mean that people just get grumpy about being in a big, long queue and having to find ways, and there's obviously additional charges put in and so on and so forth. Is it Forest? Is it just the price you pay for being in the big time?
No. I think it's happening across all of the Premier League, but that does not make it okay. One of the special things about Forest is our fan base and the loyalty and how much we care and the atmosphere and the fact that we have such an affinity with our club. And that's what I love about Forest. If we got relegated, I'd obviously not be happy about it. But at the end of the day, that's not why I'm a Forest fan. So I think to say, oh, it's a price we pay for being in the Premier League, that's a terrible excuse. And I'm not happy with this at all. I've actually felt that the Premier League experience has worsened my experience as a fan. And I think I speak for a lot of fans as well. I felt the atmospheres haven't been as good. My price, I now pay £500 more than what I paid previously, which without any warning and with only 2 months to make up the money, I'm just a student. That's difficult for me to make up. And the away ticketing system, as everyone's heard, is ridiculous. So I think we need to go back to where we were before, because things needed adjusting for the Premier League. But I don't want to become like these other, as I've said before, soulless tin pot plastic clubs. I don't want to be like those. I like that we have real fans in the ground, and there are new fans who also can't get tickets. So I don't understand who this is benefiting, other than perhaps the corporate big boys who will pay all the money, like £300 a ticket, because they're silly. So that's my thoughts on the matter. And I'm sure I'll get into some trouble for saying it, but it needs to be said.
Well, every fan is entitled to their opinion, and judging from what was on social media on Thursday, you are not alone there, Ellie. Personally, the only thing I will add in there is that whether it's going to football or whether it's going to gigs or whatever, I wouldn't mind if I never have to deal with Ticketmaster again. Anyway, that brings us to the end of Friday 5 for this week. We will obviously be back over the weekend with our report on the Forest Wolves match. Another crucial game for Forest, another one where they will really be looking to try and capitalise on the upturn in performance and try and translate that into a result. In the meantime, all that remains is for me, Rich Ferraro, to say thank you to George for providing the news, thank you to Ellie for providing her rants, and most of all, thank you, listener, for joining us. Come on, you Reds.
Sports Social Podcast Network.
The secret's oat for nourishing your sensitive skin. Start each day with Aveeno's Daily Moisturizing Body Wash in the shower, which gently cleanses and doesn't dry out your skin. Then slather on the Daily Moisturizing Body Lotion for 24 hours of clinically proven hydration. This powerful combo gives you 2 times the moisture in 2 easy steps, thanks to both nourishing oat formulas. Get softer, smoother skin and shop Aveeno now at Target.